Hi, this is Jason from Horrific Nightmares, and welcome to another edition of What's in the Bag, Jay? Now, this is a series where I pick 6 movies from my collection that I've never seen, write their names on a piece of paper, throw them in the bag, draw one out at random, and do a short review. Now, returning this week, of course, there's my Freddy vs. Jason die, and that determines what returns next week. Returning is, back by popular demand, Nightmare at Noon. Antidote, Dark Room, Devil's Express, Stripperland, and making its debut is Paul Naschy's Fury of the Wolfman. Now, of course, at the end of this, I roll my die and draw names out at random. And if there's any that do not get picked and you want to see them back in the countdown or in the lineup next week, definitely vote on it. I will definitely take it under consideration. I had a couple votes for Nightmare at Noon, so it's back in the lineup. So, let me grab this bag, and Amy likes this one. Give it a good tussle. Oh! One just flew out. And it's Nightmare at Noon. Now that's a heck of a way to draw one. It just flew right out of the bag. So, Nightmare at Noon it is. Did not expect that. I'll be reviewing that shortly. But, let's do our die thing here. Even my wife thought that one was funny. Let's see. Let's line these all up side by side. And roll the die and see what comes out. 4. So, I'm going to draw 4 out of the bag at random. Yeah, that's good. And see what comes back next week. First is Dark Room. The second is Antidote. Stripperland. And finally, Fury of the Wolfman. Now, those are the 4 that are coming back. If you guys are interested in Devil's Express remaining, definitely vote for it. And I am actually going to take a look at Nightmare at Noon and be back with a short review later. Well, I'm back. I just watched Nightmare at Noon, and here are my thoughts. Nightmare at Noon is a 1988 film, which runs approximately 96 minutes, and is written and directed by Nico Mastorakis. Now, he, of course, did The Zero Boys, which is a fantastic movie. I know it's gone up on with Arrow Video, but if you can find it for a decent price, definitely pick it up. It's a really well done film. And he also did Island of Death, which was a video nasty, which I still haven't seen, but desperately want to. I've heard nothing but interesting things about it. Now, as I had said before, this had gotten a Scream Factory release, I would say middle of last year, maybe towards the end of last year, maybe. And to be honest with you, I had never heard of it. So when I found it at the flea market that I go to on Sundays, I was really eager to pick it up and check it out. Now, I love the cover art, of course. The cover art for the Scream Factory is also good, and I believe it's very similar to this cover art. But had never heard of the company, so I was a little apprehensive about what the transfer was going to look like. Well, the transfer was pretty darn good. So that's always a good thing. Now, Nightmare at Noon stars Wings Hauser as Ken Griffiths. He, of course, was in Rubber, Tales from the Hood, Watchers 3, and The Carpenter. He was pretty much a mainstay in the 80s. I believe the first movie I saw him in was Vice Squad, if I'm not mistaken. But, yeah, he was pretty much a mainstay in the 80s. He was in a lot of films. This also has Bo Hopkins as Riley. Bo Hopkins was in Phantoms, Uncle Sam, and Mutant, along with Brian James. It has George Kennedy as Sheriff Hanks. Unfortunately, he passed away on February the 28th of 2016 at the age of 91. He was in Brain Dead, The Terror Within. Of course, he was in Creepshow 2 and Just Before Dawn. In Creepshow 2, he played in the segment of Old Chief Woodenhead. And finally, Brian James as the albino. He passed away on August the 7th of 1999 at the age of 54. He was in Frogtown 2, Mom, The Horror Show, I believe it's also called House 3, if I'm not mistaken, and one of my favorite movies of all time, Blade Runner, where he played a replicant. Now, some interesting things about this film. This was shot in 1986, but not released until 1988. Mutant had both Wings Hauser and Brian James. And a little weird thing about the film, the horses that were used in this film were actually trained not to react to gunfire. The albino, played by Brian James, actually never utters a word through the entire film, which I was kind of hoping he would, but when I watched it, after I thought about it, kind of glad that he didn't. Made it more mysterious that way. And the helicopter chase was shot with 4 different cameras on the ground and 1 in the air, and it took 4 days to complete. Now, a brief synopsis on the film. Wings Hauser plays a rock and roll lawyer with his wife who are kind of going across the U.S. in a RV. I believe he has a week's vacation. They pick up Bo Hopkins in their RV, and they end up in this very desolate town where George Kennedy plays the sheriff. Now, in the very beginning, Brian James and a group of, I guess, mercenaries shoot something into the water, which is supposed to have a chemical effect. And in order to isolate this town from the rest of the world, they put up some kind of magnetic field where no cars can escape. So it kind of has that Crazies feel to it, the remake, where they try to limit it to one town and cut it off from the rest of society. That's pretty much where I'm going to go with the film. It turns the people into something, but I'm not going to tell you what. But, yeah, it's an interesting film. It's not a great film. It feels like kind of like a mixed bag in a way. It's an action and adventure kind of horror hybrid sort of movie. But what saves this movie from being a complete mess is the lead characters, Wings Hauser and Bo Hopkins, and George Kennedy too. But more so, Bo Hopkins and Wings Hauser. They're really good in this. They banter well together, and they have some really cool one-liners. Now, as I said before, this was released on Scream Factory, I believe middle of last year sometime. Do I recommend a pickup? If this sounds like your type of deal, if you really enjoyed the crazies and action adventure sort of horror films, then this is definitely for you. Me, myself, I think I'm going to stick with the DVD because I didn't really pay a lot for it, and I did like it. There is entertainment to be had. It's not a great film. Like I said, it's kind of messy, but it's full of explosions and action, and the helicopter chase at the end is one of the best that I've ever seen. And it was really, really cool to watch. I'm very surprised that the people doing the helicopter chase actually lived. Who knows, maybe they didn't. But it was an incredible chase scene. So, have you seen Nightmare at Noon? Definitely comment below and let me know. And if you do have the Scream Factory edition, definitely let me know if there are any kind of special features with it. Just out of curiosity. And if you like what you see in here, hit that like button and subscribe. And until next time, peace.